Tanse, good afternoon. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. Following months of turmoil within the Liberal Party, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his resignation Monday morning. Trudeau has now requested the president of the Liberal Party to begin the process of appointing a new leader. And he also asked Governor General Mary Simon to suspend Parliament until March 24th. APTN's Savannah Craig has the story.
It has become obvious to me with the internal battles that I cannot be the one to carry the Liberal standard into the next election.
And with those words, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will step down as leader of the Liberal government. Trudeau said he will remain as Prime Minister until a new party leader is elected.
I am a fighter, and I am not someone who backs away from a fight, particularly when a fight is as important as this one is. But I have always been driven by my love for Canada, by my desire to serve Canadians, and by what is in the best interest of Canadians.
The resignation follows months of turmoil within the Liberal Party and a gridlocked House of Commons. It culminated with Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland's resignation in December. Freeland stated she had been at odds with Trudeau for weeks over the best path forward for Canada. When asked whether Freeland's resignation sparked his decision, Trudeau said he would not provide details.
Anyone who's been watching politics closely over the past months will know that Parliament has been entirely seized by obstruction and filibustering and a total lack of productivity.
Trudeau also asked Governor General Mary Simon to prorogue Parliament until March 24th. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, whose party is leading in the polls, responded through a video posted on social media.
They want to protect their pensions and paycheck by sweeping their hated leader under the rug months before an election to trick you and then do it all over again.
Trudeau said little about Indigenous people during his press conference, but he mentioned Liberal efforts has moved Canada forward on reconciliation. Mi'kmaq Liberal Member of Parliament Jaime Baptiste says legislation affecting Indigenous people will halt with Parliament being suspended.
And there was nothing I would like to see more than to finish some of these pieces of legislation and see them get to royal assent. But with all three opposition parties saying that they're not willing to work with us, we're left in a position where these important pieces of legislation may die on the table.
However, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh said he would not work with a new leader. The NDP had been supporting the Liberal minority government up until this past December. Singh said he would use a non-confidence vote against the Liberals as early as possible to trigger an election.
New Democrats will be voting against this government for an election where Canadians will have a choice. The Liberals have let you down. They've let you down again and again. It doesn't matter who the leader is, the Liberals have let you down. They do not deserve another chance.
Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak responded to Trudeau's resignation in a written statement, saying he has taken meaningful steps to address issues that matter to First Nations, including access to housing, clean water, education, the issue of child welfare, and the passing of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Woodhouse-Nepenak says much more work remains, but Trudeau's actions have provided a foundation for future governments to build upon. Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Montreal.
Reaction to the Prime Minister calling it quits and proroguing Parliament continues to roll in from all directions. With more on that, our regular political commentator Jennifer Leywitz recently spoke to us from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. So Jennifer, Justin Trudeau has read the writing on the wall and stepped down as Liberal leader. What are the possible consequences of this?
Well, I think, we're seeing now that Parliament is going to be prorogued until late March, which, if anyone is familiar with what happens when a government is prorogued, is all of the current legislation dies on the order paper. So there's some big things we know that we're passing through Parliament. The water legislation, I think, was one of the bigger ones. I don't know if that's received royal assent yet, but that's essentially going to put everything at a standstill. And right now, one of the number one calls I've been fielding from leadership on Nations today is what is going to happen with the negotiations around our agriculture benefits, because there are a lot of nations that are attempting to advance negotiations around ag settlements. So I think there's a lot of questions in the air right now as to what's going to happen. And not only that, if we're inevitably going to have a change of government, when is that going to be? Are we still going to see that in October with a new leader? What is Jagmeet planning to do with the confidence in supply? What happens when they come back in March? I think there's a lot up in the air right now that Canadians are not understanding. Where do we go from here?
Definitely a lot of unknowns for sure. What if the Conservatives emerge as the main beneficiaries of Justin Trudeau's actions? What does a Conservative government mean for First Nations people?
I think one of the biggest questions right now is, what are your priorities as a nation? I think, Conservatives traditionally are not the government of a lot of funding. They're not the government of a lot of, social issues being at the forefront of their way of government. So I think there's going to be a definite narrative shift in what we see for priorities, especially when it comes to nations. And I think one of the biggest questions leadership have to ask right now is, what is going to happen with Bill C-92? That has not been passed yet. We're still seeing that AFN is still at the forefront of these negotiations. Where's the child welfare settlement going to be? And prevention funding and CHRT funding, all of those things that we've previously seen that have kind of moved under the Liberal government. And Jordan's principle, we're hearing about a lot of backlogs. What is the Conservatives' plans to fix that?
Really briefly for this next question, how will Trudeau's move affect ordinary people?
I think right now, ordinary Canadians are just paying attention to him stepping down. I think a lot of people are ready for the change, but what that change looks like for Canadians, we're still not sure of.
And Jennifer, what are the Indianak leaders saying about all of this, including the Indigenous leaders? I think about APTN National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak, who just shared a post on Facebook about this just before the noon hour.
Yeah, I had saw that the APTN National Chief had basically said, thank you for your time in office, thank you for your service. I did think it was a little bit too positive in the pandering, especially to the government, because at the end of the day, the government is facilitating the Indian Act. All of us as Indigenous people are going to advance self-determination. We're going to exist how we see fit in politics, but at that national high level, I do expect some type of pro-sovereignty and wanting to advance us, and coming in and saying, thank you, you've done the most anyone has ever done, when this was a government that spent the most money fighting First Nations in court. They spent more in the first few years than Stephen Harper did. How can you be so positive when, in my opinion, they do deserve critiquing in multiple different areas? So I think it was a little bit too positive, and I was hoping for a little bit more of a, we hope for better in the next leadership, and we'll work with whoever's there.
And finally, Jennifer, this last question, there's a lot of names being thrown around, but is there any guesses on who will take over the Liberal leadership now?
I would say pay very, very close attention to Mr. Mark Carney.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that as well. Maybe Chrystia Freeland, maybe Dominic LeBlanc.
Yeah, I think they're all going to be at the forefront.
Well, Jennifer, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Thank you.
And that leaves us to this week's new web poll question. Over on our website, we ask, is Justin Trudeau's legacy around Indigenous issues positive or negative? Your answers are positive, negative, or unsure. Yesterday, APTN National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak said Trudeau has done more for First Nations than any other Prime Minister. So what do you think? Have your say at www.aptnnews.ca. Manitoba RCMP have arrested a mother from Lake Manitoba First Nation after her one-year-old son was allegedly assaulted. Last Sunday at around 3 a.m. on January 5th, local RCMP received a call from paramedics who were trying to help an unconscious 16-month-old boy at a home in Lake Manitoba First Nation, 2 hours northwest of Winnipeg. The paramedics said the boy had severe injuries consistent with an assault. The 19-year-old mother was arrested and she remains in custody. The toddler was transported to hospital in Winnipeg and has been upgraded to stable condition. The accused cannot be named to protect the identity of the boy. RCMP Major Crimes is now investigating. Saskatchewan RCMP have made an arrest following a homicide investigation in the Piapot First Nation just north of Regina. Saskatchewan RCMP have charged 40-year-old Robin Cashwadam with second-degree murder in connection to the death of 30-year-old Melanie Asham Obi, who is from the neighboring Pasqua First Nation. Cashwadam was arrested on January 4th with the help of the Regina Police Service. On January 2nd at around 8:15 a.m., Southie RCMP received a report of an injured woman at a home in Payapot. When they arrived, they found Ashim Obi deceased at the scene. Cashwadam made his first court appearance on Monday. RCMP Major Crimes continues to investigate. A 17-year-old was fatally wounded in an incident in downtown Whitehorse on New Year's Day. The teen's identity is protected under a publication ban. Whitehorse RCMP say they responded to a residence at Main Street and 7th Avenue where they located the teen who had been grievously injured. 19-year-old Jackie Rudick has been charged with second-degree murder and unauthorized possession of a firearm. His next court appearance is today. Nain RCMP are asking for the public's help in finding a missing Inuk woman. 51-year-old Elizabeth Jararius was wearing a blue Canada Goose winter coat and black boots when she was last seen on Christmas Eve in Nain, Labrador. Nain is the northernmost community on the Labrador coast, 369 kilometers northeast of Happy Valley Goose Bay, and is only accessible by air or sea. Nain Ground Search and Rescue is searching and is asking people to check their property, sheds, crawl spaces, and yards. Nain RCMP is asking anyone with information on Elizabeth's whereabouts to contact RCMP at 709-922-2862 or Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. We have to take a short break, but when we return, we'll bring you an update on a group of land defenders south of Winnipeg. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The nonprofit organization behind a downtown Whitehorse shelter is under scrutiny following a number of deaths. Last month, 2 people died at the shelter within 2 weeks of each other. And as Sarah Connors tells us, one of the deceased family members says the organization needs to do better so no more people are lost. Here's that story.
This is just his smudging stuff. He would smudge every day at home. And that's how I knew he was home, because every single morning he would smudge with us and put all of his medicine out.
Nikita Bailey has fond memories of her stepfather, 56-year-old Leonard Capablanc. The Fort Nelson First Nation member lived at home with Bailey, though he would often visit the Whitehorse Emergency Shelter to socialize. She says her stepfather died from a suspected overdose at the shelter on December 18th.
And he was just always so caring and took care of us, as any father would.
The government-funded shelter is operated by nonprofit Connective. Bailey says no one from Connective contacted her or her family about her stepfather's death. She later learned Capablanc died in a shower room, and she was told that no one checked on him for 25 minutes. Bailey feels her stepfather's death could have been prevented if staff had acted sooner.
They showcase and frame themselves as people who have the ability to take care of others when they're in a vulnerable state, but they don't.
Last year, a coroner's inquest took a closer look at the deaths of 4 First Nations women who died at the shelter. 2 of the women overdosed in a shower room where they were discovered unresponsive hours later. The inquest recommended a policy review that entails monitoring high-risk spaces like the shower rooms to prevent more deaths. Bailey feels the way Connective operates isn't good enough, and she wants to see change so no more lives are lost.
Restructuring their policies and procedures, actually following their regulations, and listening to their community, because it's their fault. It's their fault that all these deaths happened.
Connective did not respond to APTN's request for comment. The jury for last year's coroner's inquest recommended that any future deaths that take place at the shelter should be subject to an independent review. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Sticking with the Whitehorse shelter, 2 lawsuits have been filed against the Yukon government surrounding the deaths of 2 women who died there. Miranda Tizia Charlie and Darla Skookum were 2 of the 4 women at the center of last year's coroner's inquest. The women died at the shelter in separate incidents in 2022 and 2023. The lawsuits, which were filed by the women's family members, argue the shelter has inadequate policies and training, as well as a pattern of systemic negligence, and that the women's deaths could have been prevented. One of the lawsuits also names Connective as a defendant. The allegations have yet to be tested in court. A Court of King's Bench justice has extended but not expanded on injunction filed against a group of protesters opposing a development in the Lemay Forest on the southern outskirts of Winnipeg. The protesters have been camped outside Lemay Forest since late December to stop the developers' removal of trees on what they say is sacred land. On December 31st, the court granted an interim injunction ordering the protesters not to impede access to the forest land owned by Tashel Development of Toronto. Ian Histed represents some of the protesters. He said they are concerned about potential unmarked graves on the land that could belong to Indigenous children. Today, the court granted a continuation but not an expansion of the December 31st injunction, as requested by Tashel Development, to respect protesters' freedom of expression. Organizers with the Coalition to Save Lemay Forest said they were happy with the decision, but they plan to file an injunction of their own against Tashel Developments.
I'm happy with it right now because that gives us time to organize and to make a call out to our governments to assist us in saving the Lemay Forest and saving our children.
We have to get to the next level, so we need to get injunctions going of our own, and we haven't had time because, of course, this all happened over Christmas time. So that was definitely deliberate, and so now we've got ourselves, we know what we're doing, so we'll be back.
Coming up next, we'll tell you all about a new comedy series, North of North, that was shot in Nunavut. We're back in less than 3 minutes. Stay with us. Starting on the east, sunny in Halifax at -1, Charlottetown -3. Cartwright 2, Happy Valley Goose Bay 2. Saguenay -4, Gaspé 1. -7 in Ottawa, Peterborough -8. Wawa -17, Thunder Bay -14. The Paw -20, Puckatawagan -20. Princess Harbor -20, Dauphin -25. Regina -18, Swift Current -9, and showers and snow. Stony Rapids -17, sunny in Uranium City at -16. High level -10. Fort Chipewyan -8. 6 in Calgary, Red Deer 1. Kamloops 2, Penticton -1. Sand Spit 10, Smithers 0. -6 in Whitehorse, Beaver Creek 0. -12 in Watee, Wrigley -15. Fort McPherson -23, Inuvik -18. -17 in Chesterfield, Baker Lake -19. And Clyde River sunny and -31, Arctic Bay -30. A new comedy series by Inuit producers Stacia Glock MacDonald and Alethea Arnaquak Barrel premieres on CBC and APTN this Tuesday. Shot on site in Nunavut, North of North, tells the story of a young Inuk mother who reinvents herself after a life-changing event. Sierra Bettens has more.
Yeah. When people ask where I'm from, I say, think of the furthest place north you've ever been. Now keep going.
When the cast of North landed in Iqaluit last January, they received a chilling greeting.
The day they came in was like -52 or something. It was frigid. It was so
aggressively cold.
It was so cold. It hurt your skin in seconds. The look on their faces when they walked into the airport, they were,
what have I gotten myself into?
On Tuesday, audiences across Canada can experience a taste of life in the Arctic with the premiere of North, written and produced by Stacey Agluck MacDonald and Alethea Arnaquak Barrel. The television series is a partnership between CBC, APTN, and Netflix.
We knew we wanted to tell a story that felt really real to us about the Arctic and life in the Arctic in Nunavut specifically. And that meant that we wanted something that felt more joyful, colorful, and complicated, but wonderfully so.
The show follows Siaya, a 26-year-old Inuk mother. She lives in the fictional Arctic town, Ice Cove, where everyone knows everyone's business. After spontaneously exiting a marriage, she looks to reinvent herself while navigating motherhood, her job, and newfound independence. Siaya is played by Anna Lambi, whose acting credits include True Detective and Trickster.
I grew up in Iqaluit, which is where we shot North of North. And I grew up seeing, so many versions of Siaya and loving so many versions of Siaya and being inspired by them. And in many ways related to her so deeply, I think, being passionate and ambitious and driven.
Aglock MacDonald's love for comedy took flight on the set of APTN's Inuktitut language series, Kanugli. She says the genre was the perfect fit for North of North.
It's not one-dimensional. You could do a lot with it, including being heartfelt, including being emotional, including even shedding a tear or two or more. Those are my favorite types of comedies, the ones that have depth to them. And that's certainly what North of North is. I think it's comedy with a real heart and soul.
North of North features a cast of both Inuit and non-Inuit actors.
Lots of small roles that are filled by Inuit in our community, background actors. It's just like a huge wealth of different types of characters on our show.
With 3 networks on board and a reach of 190 countries by the spring, the producers say it's a dream come true.
The platform itself felt like unfathomable and just so exciting to think about having that kind of opportunity and that kind of reach for a story from the Arctic.
They're excited for audiences to get a taste of Inuit humor and a more authentic view of life in the North.
More recently, Indigenous comedy shows that are breaking through, that's becoming more common now, but when we were starting to develop this show, didn't exist yet. And so we're really excited to be contributing to that brand of Native humor.
North of North premieres on CBC and APTN on January 7th and launches globally on Netflix in the spring. Sierra Buttons, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Looks really good. Definitely check that out. On this week's new episode of APTN's Face to Face, National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak joins our guest host, T.R. Wheatley, to talk about her important role, child welfare, what it was like growing up in a political family, and much more. Here's a preview.
I don't think you ever choose politics. Politics is a really hard seat to sit at. It's not an easy seat. It's not an easy role. And at the same time, if you know that you can help, I've built so many relationships with parliamentarians, with people in Ottawa and across the country ever since I was a little girl. And I needed to use those relationships to help First Nations people. And it's my love for First Nations people, even on child welfare, that I think that I had to do something. We're suffering in this country.
Definitely check that out if you can. And that's your daytime newscast for this Tuesday, January 7th. Savannah Kelly will be back for your evening newscast. Make sure to join us then. From all of us at APTN National News, hi miigwech masicho. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next day.